It's time for a heart-to-heart about PlayStation Plus Premium. Welcome to Mike Texts It Out. I'm Mike, and today I was not planning to do this video. I was actually planning to do a Secret Gaming Man video. We were going to explore the PS3 games and see how the streaming was on PlayStation Plus Premium. I mean, essentially it's just PlayStation Now, so if you've already played stuff on PlayStation Now, it's probably the same. Well, I never had PS Now, I never subscribed to it, and I did record for an hour yesterday, just me sitting there playing some games on PS3. The longer I played, the more miserable I got about the experience, and the experience is not horrible. Let's get that out of the way first. It's on par with every other streaming service. I've done videos on every streaming service, consumer-wise at this point, and they're all around the same. They're pretty good now, but I still view them as like a secondary experience, you know, maybe something that you might do if you're traveling or don't have any other way to play the game, but there's definitely a difference between a native experience and a streaming experience. And that same still holds true for PlayStation Plus Premium and their retro games. So I didn't want to do that video because I just felt myself just being unhappy. I just wanted to do a video to kind of state what the big issue is. What my big issue is with PlayStation Plus Premium, the thing that I knew that I was going to have an issue with as soon as it was announced, and that is just the retro games and the game streaming part of it in general. So when I did the video a couple weeks ago, when I went through all the games that are on PS Plus, and I was getting kind of excited about the PS3 games, and every time I saw a game I wanted to go back and play, like Infamous and Resistance, I'd be like, ooh, that's on here, but then I remember it's streaming, and I'd be like, oh. And yeah, that's kind of what it ended up being. Like, I was still trying to be optimistic a little bit in that video, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to hold off on the streaming and do a different video about it. And I streamed some of the games yesterday, and it was what I thought it was going to be. Like, the input lag is there, so if you play the original games, it just won't feel the same. Like, especially when I was playing God of War, and there were certain button prompts that I definitely hit the button on time, but it didn't register correctly, or it just felt a little bit sluggish. And it wasn't even that bad latency-wise. It's probably one of the better experiences, but still, the latency is just that streaming-wise where you're going to notice it either way. And that's just the story of streaming right now. And when we look at PlayStation Plus Premium as a whole, I already kind of went over my issues with the PS4 and PS5 game selection, which you have your newer games at the top, and then a lot of the older games have already been free before on PlayStation Plus, or they're so old they've just been super cheap, and a lot of people probably already bought them. So I kind of went over that issue, but the retro games is just a whole mess. Like, for that to be a selling point, it's super frustrating. Like, I can't even describe how disappointing it is as someone who came up with these systems, like, you know, PlayStation, PS2, PS3, PS4, just to try to go back and play the PS3 games like this. It's really disrespectful to the legacy, in my opinion. And if we take the PS3 games out of the list, the other games for PS1, PS2, and PSP are just pathetic. That game list is pathetic right now. I don't know. It seems like since the PS4, Sony has just gotten away with doing the minimum to preserve their previous systems and their previous libraries. Like, you could make the argument that the PS4 was not powerful enough to emulate PS3 games. Cool, that's fine. It probably wasn't. But PS5 is definitely powerful enough to emulate PS3 games. So I'd really like to see them just finally emulate PS3 games, because if Joe Smo on the corner can emulate PS3 games, Sony has the internal resources that they can dedicate to actually getting these games to run through emulation on a PS5. Sorry if I'm rambling a bit more than normal. I think I'm just overall frustrated with PS Plus Premium launching in this state. And I have gone and played Demon's Souls, which I've actually had a lot more fun with than I thought, and Ghost of Tsushima, which are also really good. But like, outside of those two games, it's just like, for me, it's like barely worth it. I think just having that retro collection really would have boosted the value of this thing. But with streaming being streaming and most of the retro games being PS3 games, it's just not worth it. And then also, the streaming thing is weird for PS4 games. Like, some of them have it, some of them don't. PS5, apparently, no PS5 games support streaming right now. So if it is a PS5 game that supports streaming, that means you're getting the PS4 version of it from what I read. And that makes sense because they probably don't have the hardware yet, like PS5 hardware in their data centers for streaming. Kind of like Microsoft, they announced back when they started using Series X hardware for streaming. So Sony probably just hasn't made that upgrade yet. So PS5 games, like actual PS5 games, aren't streamable yet. So that's like another weird thing with the streaming component of it. As far as streaming in general, I've been pretty positive on it on the channel. I really am a huge proponent of streaming. Like having more ways to play games and bringing more games to people is always a good thing. But I don't want it to ever be the only option. At least not right now. It's not good enough. There's no service that's good enough for it to be the only option. Sorry, Stadia. But it's just the truth. There's just a little bit too much input lag for it to handle every game. Like action games and fighting games is always going to feel a little bit off. Like I went and played Resistance 3 yesterday, and for some reason, I didn't even make it past the like tutorial area. It just felt way off for some reason. And I don't know, it's just the same thing. Like some games are better than others. And even the input lag is more in some games than others. So it's just a really inconsistent experience. When I was going to work still and I was on lunch break and I wanted to play some Xbox games on my phone with my little controller dongle, it was fun for that kind of stuff, especially playing like a more narrative driven game. But for Sony to make that the only option to play PS3 games, like come on. Overall, I just really hope Sony comes up with a better alternative. But I'm not really hopeful at this point. I just don't think it's their big focus right now. I think that they just threw this in there because, let's be honest, PlayStation Now had been around for a while and it wasn't catching on. So rolling it up into this is probably their chance of saving it. Kind of like with PlayStation Move, which failed. They just took that stuff and threw it together with a PSVR headset and sold it as a whole new contraption. That's kind of what they're doing with PlayStation Now. They just threw it together with this subscription plan. But ultimately, it's just not an adequate solution for backwards compatibility. And Sony just really needs to do better. And that's all I got to say about the situation.